We're also closely monitoring events in Italy, where the G8 summit is winding down. While rich countries continue their fight against recession, their leaders will spend the last day of the summit addressing the troubles of poorer nations and how to help them in these distressed times. Bloomberg's Ryan Chilcote has been following the latest, and he brings us more. Ryan?
Yeah, President Obama, the rest of the G8 leaders, and several African leaders and several heads of international organizations are meeting right now. The topic is Africa and African aid. Keep in mind the G8 has a very poor record on making commitments to aid and then not following through on them, not actually delivering that aid. Just within the last couple of hours, however, we have learned that the G8 has a new program for aid for Africa. It is not actually aid per se. It is financing in the amount of $12 billion to support an agricultural development program, not just for Africa, for the whole world. But you can assume that the bulk of it will go to Africa. The idea is to give not just the typical seed, feed, and fertilizer that is usually part of these programs, but to go beyond that to include grain mills, storage facilities, trading platforms, to really allow African countries to create some kind of food security and ability to trade with one another, trade that food with one another. In addition to that, President Obama will be meeting with the president of South Africa, President Zuma. All of that, of course, before this evening, he leaves for Ghana for his first trip since taking office to sub-Saharan Africa. He'll be there for about a day. Scarlett?
And speaking of Africa, Ryan, I understand President Obama had dinner with Libya's leader last night.
Yeah, not exactly a one-on-one dinner. There were about 20 leaders there, but nonetheless, the two did sit just 2 seats apart from one another, with the Prime Minister of Italy between them. Very interesting. They met just before the dinner and shook hands. That's the first time any U.S. leader has come into contact with President Gaddafi in 23 years, since President Reagan called Gaddafi the mad dog of the Middle East after accusing him of being a state sponsor, or accusing Libya of being a state sponsor of terror. So this was the beginning, a real new sort of fresh start for Libyan-American relations. Of course, those relations were officially restored in 2004. Scarlett?
Thanks very much, Ryan Chilcote.